Hey, War Machine, it's back on. Alright, so it's been a while since I've done a War Machine video. That's kind of what started this whole YouTube channel out, honestly. Me making a War Machine Mark 1 cosplay. If you have watched those or have kept up with this channel over the half a year or so that it's been active, then you will know that I started making one. But I've also been doing a few other things in the meantime, like I've made a full Daredevil cosplay. I've made a few other things for various other characters like Star-Lord's guns. I'm also working on a Destiny cosplay, which I mentioned in one of my other videos, but I haven't put anything on here about it yet. And I'm also going to do some probably other random stuff just to fill out time in the meantime, right? But so far for War Machine, I've made his hands, helmet, biceps, forearms, shoulders, various weapons, and his legs. But I've also still got to do the biggest parts, which would be the chest, the back, his abs, and some other weapons as well, and probably just some bits to make it look better when it's all together. I'm still yet to paint some things, so that's obviously going to take time. But yeah, here we go. I'll show you where I'm at. Okay, so here we've got some of the bigger pieces printed out, but not really anything else. They've been put together. We've got the chest, the abs, and the back piece over here. But if we take a closer look at the back, you will realise that I've done a pretty awful job of putting this together. A lot of the solder lines you can see, because I thought some pieces were meant to be on the inside when they weren't, and not to mention that the files for this were actually free, which is incredible that someone's made this, available for free. That is super awesome, but they are not the highest quality, so there's a few gaps and areas where it gets so thin that the printer basically just doesn't print anything. Although I have stated before that this is mainly a fun build. I'm not doing this as professionally as I would some other things that I've made. But I know that's not an excuse for me to necessarily make it look bad or leave it bad or not improve it or anything like that, but I am giving myself a little bit more slack since this is the biggest project I've ever taken on. But yeah, I will try and make it look good, but please bear that in mind. But before I focused on that, there was something else I wanted to make. So this is the front for the piece that's going to be the missile launcher that rests on his shoulder. There's going to be missile heads that rest in there. I also made a back piece with no holes in it, just so it'd cover it up. And I'm probably going to make the outside, the sides, out of foam, just so it's a little bit lighter, because in the future I want to make it motorized. But the first thing I did was grab some all-purpose filler and just fill in the print lines that you can see on the top. Then I got a roll of 3mm graph foam and cut out some shapes for the sides. After I'd cut out one side and glued it on, I then completely abandoned it and decided I was going to 3D print it instead. And since I'm fortunate enough to have access to two printers, I designed the entire box, then split it in half, setting each printer to do one half each. This way it saved on time, and I was able to get the entire thing printed in just under 7 hours. After this was done, all I needed to do was glue the sides together so it'd be one whole piece. To do this, I used some hard plastic adhesive, which I always usually use for 3D prints, especially on PLA, because I've just found it works really well and really holds the plastic together. After I'd applied it, I waited about 30 seconds to a minute just for it to dry a little bit, and then pressed both pieces together. And this is what it looked like when it was all together. Nothing too fancy, but still a pretty good case for the entire thing. So, with all the sides made, I moved on to the missile heads, which are obviously going to go where these small holes are. The missiles are just capsule shapes that I sliced in half, and if you're familiar with 3D printing, you'll be able to tell that these were printed on a raft, which I left on. I chose to leave these on because even though they're pretty snug fit in the holes, without the raft they would have just fallen through. So I can afford to leave them on and glue them to the inside, since that's all going to be covered up by the other pieces I've printed. Then I just glued the top piece to the rest of it. Since this glue takes a little while to cure, I left it for a little while with something heavy on the top. This is just a tub of PVA glue that I had laying around. This happened to just be the heaviest thing I had on hand, so I just left that on top and came back a few hours later. After that was done, I got some all-purpose filler again and just filled in the gaps so it'd look a little bit better when it was all painted, which is exactly what I moved on to next. I used some matte black spray paint for the entire box, being sure to give it a few decent coats, and then used a red gloss colour spray paint for the heads of the missiles. And whilst I was waiting for this to dry, I decided to do some little detail pieces for the box that I'd made, so this just involved painting around the areas where the missile heads would be sticking out. I did design this with a little bit of a divot in it, purely for this reason, just to give it a bit more detail and make it stand out a little bit more. Now, something else I had to do was trim off a section of the raft, just because it wouldn't fit in the hole without it scraping against the inside of the wall. This was purely my fault, just for the way I designed it, but I didn't really think about it at the time, but fortunately it was an easy fix. And if we take a look on the inside, we can see that these fit in pretty well without scraping against anything. All I did from here was glue the back piece on, and this is pretty much the finished result. I'm really happy with how it's turned out, and if we put it next to the chest piece, even though the chest isn't painted yet, I think it looks pretty good. The more of this I make, the more excited I get to wear it, which will hopefully be very soon. Okay, probably going to leave this video here because it's been going on a little while, but pretty happy with how that turned out. To say it was just something I threw together quickly in some 3D building software. The only thing I really need to do now for the rest of the armour is make the chest, paint the chest, the back and the abs. Then make a few more little bits like the feet and possibly just some bits to cover up the gaps in the armour when I'm wearing it all. I also need to figure out some way of harnessing it to myself and making it so that I can actually wear it properly, but I'll probably show that hopefully in the next video. So by then, hopefully it should all be painted and have some kind of harness system inside so that I can clip it together and wear it properly. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I know I'm making this series sort of for an empty audience at this point. But yeah, any attention you give this is greatly appreciated, so thanks for watching. More on this soon.